Okay, so this is the project for this weekend. I left the word Acme off this. I should have put it on here. I want you to get comfortable with using React Router. Really, it's going to feel like two routes here, but notice if you look at my URL, these are seeded with some data. I forgot how I set it up initially, but you can see Curly is managed by Larry. Larry is managed by Mo, and Mo isn't managed by anybody. And this is sort of the non-edited version. When I click on any of these, I go to, first of all, notice I go to a different route, okay? Users, edit. And now what was just some text is now giving me a select object. By the way, this select object is just going to show me the people that are managers. The only people that are managers are Larry and Mo. So if I go over here and I say, Curly is going to be managed by Mo, I'm going to change this. And once I end up doing that, well, that was not what I expected. Should. It's a little disappointing. I wonder if I was looking at stale data there. But if I go over here and I have Curly, and I say Curly is going to get managed by Mo, and I say Larry is managed by Mo already, and we'll say Mo also gets managed by Mo. Okay? That's what the behavior is. Not that different from what we looked at today with the form. A little bit of a wrinkle. A little bit of a wrinkle here. I'll show you my suggestions in terms of how I set it up. You don't necessarily have to do it this way.
And home is just an index.
Home is just the index route with my instructions in here. So 3 routes, 3 client-side routes. If I look at my server, I've got my server.js, I've got my routes.js. The way that I did it is I have a route for users. When I go to get the users, I also get the users manager. Okay? So I get all of the users with their managers. You can see this here. You can always test this out. If I go back over here and I actually hit this route with API users, here's the user with their managers. If you don't have a manager, you can have a manager of null. Okay? This is the API of the managers. And when I get the managers, I actually get the people that they manage. I'm not even positive I'm using that at this point, but that's just how I ended up setting up these routes. So that when I end up going here, I've got these 2 routes. And what this allows me to do is that I've got the users and I've got the managers. I've got the users, and I could do this list. And the reason why I have the managers is that when I go here, I only want to show the managers. You can do it however you want to do it, okay? But in the end, the functionality has to be that the only users that show up to be managers are users that are designated as managers, okay? So we've got a very simple user object. A user has a name, and they have an isManager flag, which is a Boolean value. In fact, I was thinking about doing this, adding managers, demoting managers, promoting managers. This is enough. This is enough. If you want to do that, you could end up doing it. But this is enough to sort of, starting a project from scratch, getting your routing in there. The way that I set it up here, I've got my server-side routes. I've also got a put that basically allows me to set the manager for a user. Okay? In terms of the client side, you could do this however you want to do it. I've got my index. I've got my home. I've got my users. And I've got my users edit page. The only thing that I did a little bit differently here is I've got this user item. And so I have the same component for user item that's being used by these 2 different components. So here, I'm using user item, but I'm not editing the user. But when I'm in the edit state, okay, I basically, instead of rendering out just a tag with a link, I render out a select object and I wire up the select object so I can end up changing. You don't have to do it that way in the end. I don't really care. Do it whatever way it works so that it's working. But this is just a suggestion. You don't have to do it that way. Again, if you find out you're writing, it would be totally legitimate. I'll just sort of throw this out as an example. Would be totally legitimate to have really 3 components. Have a component for home, have a component for users, and have a component for users edit. Okay? The difference between I don't know if I should really say this. In the end, there's going to have to be something here. I don't know if this is actually even true. We're immediately, when we're changing this value here, when we end up changing this value here, we're immediately going back to the other page. So I don't even know necessarily. There's a bunch of different ways that you could end up doing this. Just in the end, this is a functionality that we want. So that was kind of there's going to have to be, is there going to have to be a smart component somewhere? I think so. Well, I could be wrong about that too. Okay? You'll see whether or not you end up actually needing to have a smart component. I think you might be able to get away. Actually, you might be able to get away without it. Because like in the end, the user ends up changing who, if you think about that select object, when that value changes, you could just get the new manager ID. And as long as you ended up passing down, right, we're going to have a smart component at the top. And as long as you ended up passing that information down, you could end up using it. The other thing that I really don't mind you doing is that every time you end up changing a manager, I have no problem with you going in, reloading the data. I think that's totally legitimate as well. Let me just sort of throw that out at you with another example here. So this other example that we did here, where we're changing our state like this. So this is a hint of how you could do this, just to keep it kind of simplistic here, is that when I go and I end up saving my product here, I have absolutely no problem at all. If you were to go over here to say post, then axios.get API products, then you're going to get your products, then you're going to get your response.data. Then these are going to be your products. This dot set state products. This will get you to the exact same spot, and I think for this weekend project, feel free to do that. Just reload your data on that manager change. Totally legitimate. This should work as well. I'm going to save this up so you'll have that as well. Just make sure I don't have any errors here. So when I go to add a product, I get to the same spot. It just is going to end up going and making an AJAX request to get all the products for a second time. All right. Let me stop recording this.